The noise, the speed, the danger of Grand Prix racing. The 1982 season has just begun at the Kyalami circuit in South Africa. The event ended in tension and tantrums, but it didn't begin that way. In the week before the race, the drivers were arriving from their homes around the world with wives and girlfriends. First priority to soak up the southern summer sun and relax. It's all part of the high life and playboy image that surrounds the select group of men who drive some of the fastest cars in the world. They defy death and injury every time they race, and in between, they enjoy life to the full. And yet the Kyalami meeting was to provide some unhappy memories. In 1981, the Kyalami race was held, but it did not count towards the World Championship. This was because of a dispute between the international racing body, FISA, and the Constructors Association, FOCA. It was these two groups who lined up this year against the drivers. Disagreement over the new skirts, the aerodynamic aid helping cars to grip the track, meant teams including Ferrari and Renault boycotted the race. So it was only a partial success. There was a special interest in Kyalami 1982, however, because of the return after a 2.5-year retirement of former world champion Niki Lauda of Austria. He is the only man still racing who has been world champion twice, and he is especially admired because of his heroic recovery after a horrendous crash in 1976. Comebacks in sport are never easy, and they're not always advisable. We asked his Marlboro McLaren teammate, John Watson, how hard it would be for Lauda.
Well, I think it'll not be very difficult, as already proven over the first 2 days of unofficial testing this week. And in many ways, it's like riding a bicycle. Once you learn, you never forget. And also, I think that he personally has got more motivation for motor racing now than he had at the time he retired, because basically I think the reason he retired is because he'd lost interest in motor racing and therefore decided to stop. And likewise, the reason he decided to come back again is because he wanted to. And I think this reflected in his performances on the first 2 days of practice, or unofficial practice this week.
What problems will he have to overcome being away for 2 years?
I think there are really very few problems, because he's mastered the car and the development in tires and cars. And he's been training very hard to get back into physical condition. And really the last thing left to do now is actually compete in the motor race, which traditionally here at Kyalami hasn't been the most difficult, most physically demanding race that we take part in. Though this year I think it may be more so than previous years. But once he goes through that, then he'll be fully fledged Grand Prix driver number 2 or part 2.
Niki Lauda quickly made the grade in Grand Prix racing, and in 1975 in a Ferrari, he became world champion. The following year, he was favorite to win again. Then in August at the Nürburgring, disaster struck. His car went out of control, skidded, and was struck by 2 other cars. The Ferrari exploded in a fireball, and Lauda was trapped in the flames. Almost incredibly, Lauda was back behind the wheel less than 6 weeks later, his face horribly scarred. The man who had been near to death was back in action at the Ferrari testing track. The world could only applaud and marvel at the man. He went on to compete in most of the remaining Grand Prix, determined to hold off his challengers in the race for the title, and when the last event came, the Tokyo Grand Prix, he was again head of the table. It seemed nothing could stop him, and he appeared to be heading for one of the great sporting comebacks of all time. But in spite of his undoubted courage, there was to be no fairy tale ending. Because of the torrential rain, Lauda decided of his own accord to retire from the race. It was just too dangerous, he said. For him, safety was more important than glory, and he saw his great rival, James Hunt, win the title by a single point. Lauda's decision, although regretted by the Ferrari team, served to enhance his reputation as a man of great character. He was now a household name all over the world, and he proved he had the makings of a star when he again became world champion in 1977. '78 also brought its successes, and Lauda played a leading part in several Grand Prix, as here in Argentina. However, 1978 turned out to be the year of Mario Andretti of the United States. The following year, Lauda was still there, but success was proving elusive. Suddenly, during practice for the Canadian Grand Prix, he drove into the pits, took off his helmet, and said he was quitting for good. How did Lauda himself feel after such a long absence?
I feel all right, otherwise I would not have done it. You know, everything is good, it's my first race. I'm interested to see how I go, and then we can speak more about it.
Are you nervous?
No, not the same as you always are when you're going into a big race like this.
Lauda was returning to a sport on the point of being dominated by a new breed of turbocharged racing cars. These include the Renaults, the Ferraris, and the Brabham BMWs, and they have already proved so successful that other leading manufacturers are planning their own versions. Quite simply, they are faster. Even the practice times revealed that the turbos are capable of doing over 300 kilometers per hour on the long straights, over 11 kilometers per hour faster than the conventional models. These are equipped with well-tried engines that have at least stood the test of time, like the Cosworth Ford V8 and the Matra V12. The turbo engines work on the principle of forcing a mixture of fuel and air at high pressure into the engine. This gives them an added advantage at high altitude tracks like Kyalami. They can cope better with the thinner air. So the stage was set for an intriguing battle. Would the 7 turbo cars that qualified stay the pace, or would reliability prove more important? So while the mechanics waged their battle with each other, another conflict was brewing behind the scenes. On the Wednesday, 3 days before the race, the drivers held a private meeting to discuss details of a document sent to them a few weeks earlier by the international racing body FISA. They were not entirely happy with it. In order to get a new super license, the drivers believed they were being asked to accept clauses which could restrict their freedom to change teams or even to speak their feelings in public. They decided to hold a full meeting on the Thursday morning at the racetrack, where they were invited by an official of their own Grand Prix Drivers Association to board a special bus.
Now we are waiting for the girl.
It was now clear that the drivers were determined to make a stand over the super license issue. Were they seeking more power for themselves? This was the question we put to John Watson.
Doesn't pick up anything.
Aren't you giving yourself more power, really?
I don't like to think that we're doing it to give ourselves power. We're just trying to get what we feel is fair for us. And I think it's bad when there's any dispute at any racetrack. I mean, I remember last year in San Marino, there was a dispute between FOCA and FISA, which went on for 5 hours in the first day of practice, and we had to hang around and wait until that dispute was solved. So I suppose the situation today isn't new, although it might be made look so.
The losers are going to be the 100,000 people, of course, who want to come and see this race.
Well, you're talking about not having a race in that case. I'm sure that we will race. I hope that we do. But I think that we need to get a degree of cooperation on this issue before we do drive.
Temperatures were raised when a van tried to block the path. Suddenly, the bus drove off, with the sporting press chasing madly along behind. The pressmen finally tracked their quarry down.
What's going to happen now?
We don't know yet. No idea.
Are you just going to stay in the bus?
Just going to stay at the hotel, yes.
Going back to the hotel?
We're going into the hotel now, so we don't exactly know what's happening at the moment.
Is it going to be a Grand Prix?
I would think there would be a Grand Prix, but we don't know exactly.
The unimaginable had happened. Virtually the entire corps of Grand Prix racing drivers had staged a walkout when they should have been starting the first day of official practice racing. They had retired en masse to their hotel, and the 24-hour siege of Sunnyside Park was beginning. They were refusing to speak to the press for the time being, while they sought new negotiations with the racing authorities. As a sign of their newfound solidarity, the drivers decided to share one room, and that night, the sit-in became a sleep-in. The next morning, we asked Lauda whether they were all suspended.
I don't know. I'm here in the room. I haven't got anything. We got a piece of paper saying that these and these drivers under this and this law has got their license taken away. We looked up the book and we don't think it's right.
Are the drivers unanimous in...
Yes, fully.
The drivers had, in fact, decided to send Didier Pironi as their representative to a crisis meeting at the racetrack. They insisted they were not making demands, just a request to have the offending clauses removed from the new license form. The owner of the Kyalami circuit, Bobby Harsleaf, was also feeling the pressure. He stood to lose millions of dollars if the race was canceled, and was reportedly drawing up plans to impound all the cars at the racetrack if the worst came to the worst. Members of the Constructors Association were equally worried and very angry. They believed the drivers should not have the right to break their contracts to any one team, especially in the middle of a racing season. This is something which has happened in the past. The meeting was held in the trackside office of the South African Automobile Association, which controls all motorsports in the country. But if its officials tried to play a mediating role, there was no immediate sign that they had been successful. The faces of the men leaving the meeting seemed to indicate that the issue was still far from settled. Kin Terrell, one of Britain's veteran manufacturers, had nothing to say. He planned to run 2 cars in the race. The French president of FISA, Jean-Marie Balestre, a controversial figure in the world of motorsport. He didn't look in the best of moods either. Pironi, accompanied by Jody Scheckter, was asked if he had any news.
Not yet. It's nothing new anyway.
Can you give us
I
some
have
news?
nothing to say.
When can you give us some news?
I hope very early.
And did Monsieur Balestre feel the driver's action was pre-planned?
Absolutely, because during the tour last month, we announced to the driver the new rule of the World Championship, and they receive in December all the information for the new license, you see. and they don't protest, absolutely not, and they sign all the license formula for the championship, and they say nothing. It's not fair, it's not correct, because they have all possibility for inform the federation, and we can act before the Grand Prix and organize meeting together for try to find a compromise or a new rule, you see. But they wait, especially the beginning of the race, for organize a strike, and we have in the world 100,000 drivers for all the motorsport, and all these drivers respect the rule in each country, and 31 professional drivers cannot have exception. The law is the same for everybody. They must respect the rule also when they are professional drivers, and I can say more because they are professional.
Strong words against the drivers from Monsieur Balestre, and many of the frustrated sports fans no doubt agreed. But does former champion James Hunt have any sympathy?
Yes, as usual, I think the drivers have handled it badly, but then that's understandable. And unfortunately, I think what's happening is that the powers that be are taking an unnecessarily hard line on the thing because the drivers are handling it badly, but they don't have an opportunity to handle it well. For example, the problem is that the vast majority of the drivers signed. But then that was in December when they're all sitting at home by themselves, miles from any other driver, and the team turns up, the team manager turns up and says, if you want to drive for us next year, you've got to sign this by whatever the date was, deadline, otherwise you won't be in the team. So the guy's sitting at home, he can't communicate with the other drivers, he doesn't have anybody's phone number and stuff. He signs, right? Now, 4 of them didn't, or a number of them didn't. They're here and saying, look, you chaps shouldn't sign the document. Now the whole lot say we shouldn't have signed it. Yeah. And they're getting, on that technicality, because this is the first possible opportunity the drivers ever had of getting together. And whereas FISA and FOCA get together all the time, because they're all based close to London and Paris, and they have their meetings in Paris, right? Drivers are dotted all over the world out of the season. Yeah. So they meanwhile have done things that the drivers haven't had a chance to fight about. And it's not so much the technicalities, which are very complicated in fairness, and there are good cases for both sides. It's much more that the drivers are feeling browbeaten again, and I have to say that I think they are being browbeaten. And what's more, their objections, they're definitely being, as they object, they're definitely being browbeaten, and that's why we've reached this impasse.
Do you feel sad about not being out there in the next day or so?
Well, I've got 31 cars to choose from at the moment. I'm the only driver here who hasn't got to sign anything.
By now, in fact, the driver's licenses had been suspended. The cars remained under wraps, and the authorities announced contingency plans to hold the race 1 week later with less experienced and comparatively unknown pilots at the wheel. Then, just as suddenly, came news of a compromise agreement. The drivers did not have full details, but they believed their requests would be considered and announced they would take part in Friday's practice session. The mechanics were in action again, and the race was definitely on. There was general relief all around. How did Lauda feel?
All right, that's what we're here for.
How do you feel
And
about
Watson.
getting back?
Well, we're all going back up to the circuit. We're all going to practice now, and there'll be a race. So I suppose everybody must be very happy with that situation.
Do you feel you lost anything?
I assume because we're going back up, we have come to a satisfactory agreement from both sides.
And how do you feel personally?
I feel fine. I slept very well. It was like boys' dormitory at school. No problem.
And so it was back to the special coach and back on the road again to Kyalami. It was already late Friday morning, with only just enough time for the drivers to get ready for one shortened day of official practice instead of 2. It's these important practice times that determine who qualifies for the race and their order on the starting grid. The Grand Prix preparations now went into top gear. Everything was ready. In pole position, René Arnoux in a Renault. He won here in 1980. The start is no longer by flag. The light changes to green, and they're off. Turbocharged cars started in the first 6 positions, and led by Arnoux, they dominated the early part of the race. His teammate, Alain Prost, quickly moved up into 2nd place, followed by the 2 Ferraris. In 5th place was Keke Rosberg in a Williams, then Riccardo Patrese in a Brabham BMW. But the first disaster was not far away. On the very first lap, Jean-Pierre Jarier was involved in a bump at Clubhouse Corner. He lost control and plowed into the catch fencing. He was unhurt. On lap 6, Villeneuve's engine blew. Shortly before, world champion Nelson Piquet went off the track in his Brabham. That was 2 of the turbos out already, and there had been only 7 of them among the 26 starters. Would they last the pace? Then, midway through the race, the leader, Alain Prost, was in serious trouble. His front right-hand wheel was off the ground, apparently locked. He had lost so much speed that he was being overtaken by tail-enders he had just lapped. And his main problem soon became very apparent. One of his rear tires had completely shredded itself. He drove into the pits, mercifully only a short distance away, on his hubcap. The bodywork was damaged, and possibly the suspension too. The race seemed to be over for him. The Renault mechanics performed marvels in changing all 4 wheels in near record time. Prost was sent back into the race, although he had lost a full minute and a complete lap over his rivals. He'd fallen back 7 places. With great skill and daring, Prost fought his way back through the field, and by the 68th of the 77 laps, he had regained the lead. On the way, he set a new lap record, averaging 216 kilometers per hour. He came home to take the checkered flag in a new race record, averaging 205 kilometers per hour, and that after losing a minute in the pits. The Renault team were naturally delighted, and so was the enthusiastic crowd who had been wondering whether they would ever see a race at all. But it had been worth waiting for. Prost has proved in only his 3rd Grand Prix season that he has the ability and the car to be a champion. But the celebrations were short-lived. The drivers were told immediately after the race that they were again suspended. To make matters worse, on the following Thursday, FISA announced in Paris that 6 of the drivers were being fined $10,000 each for threatening not to compete in the race. They were also given a suspended sentence of having their racing license withdrawn for 5 races over the next 2 years. 23 other drivers have been fined $5,000, also with suspended sentences. Kyalami 1982 will be remembered for many things. An exciting race, with the Renault turbos finishing 1st and 3rd. In 2nd place, after a great drive, Carlos Reutemann in a conventionally powered Williams, and just as creditable, Niki Lauda in 4th place in his McLaren. But there's a reverse side to the coin. All the drivers must look forward to the next Grand Prix in Argentina on March 7th with mixed feelings. Will their dispute be solved by then? Or has the Kyalami strike threat broken up the closely knit family of Grand Prix racing forever?